10 or something.
What language?
Japanese, ideally.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm kind of a low talker, so you may have to.
Boost.
You want me to count again?
Yeah, that'd be great.
1, 2, 3, 4. That's probably about as loud as I'll talk.
Do I need to check the settings on here?
No, that's fine. We'll get it.
5, 6.
That's perfect. Dad, can you tell?
Test 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The problem is, this could be on the show. I
That's
noticed
true, they could
the
make
countdown, the testing,
Yeah.
all of that.
Yeah, it usually starts with a 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
But because we're probably going to do this as an insert and not as its own episode, we probably won't need to do
Although I wouldn't hate having that.
Okay, so
Should they do it?
all right, so we're going to count down. We're going to say 3,
I don't
2,
want to
1,
just be
go.
an insert.
That's fair.
Maybe they can be their own special episode.
No, I just want to get it
We're
over
going to
with.
hold this till June.
We're not doing this till midnight.
I mean,
There we go.
how could I say no to these guys?
All right, so Dad, you say 3. Biff, you say 2. I'll say 1. David, you say go.
Okay.
Get ready. Brace yourself.
Wow. that's
Here we
impressive.
go.
Maybe
It's
your dad
time
should be
for
a special guest
another
first, too.
episode
Yeah.
of the Benji and David CC Radio Podcast.
There's no radio involved. That's
Oh.
David.
Just podcast has to have radio. You're listening to it. It has to be radio. Anyway. 3.
2.
1. Go.
Hi, I'm Benji,
And I'm David.
and we're best friends from college who enjoy hanging out and talking about stuff.
So we're going to do that. And hopefully you enjoy listening to it. This is the CC Podcast.
You guys are dumb.
Right, I'm Benji, and I'm David. Blah, 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 blah. All right.
We've got some special guests
We
today.
have special guests here in the office living room. What would you call this room?
The office.
In the office. We are recording in the
The
office.
studio office.
It is the next episode of the CC Podcast. And David, who do we have in?
Well, we have your dad here. Who else do we have?
We have your dad here,
And your dad's name is Rusty.
and your dad's name is Biff. Which, by the way, so Biff, you were going by Biff before the movie Back to the Future came out.
I was going by Biff before I even knew I was Frank. My real name is Frank, but I've been Biff since I can remember.
So when
That
did
is
you
true.
when did you learn that your name was Frank? I didn't know this story either.
I learned my name was Frank at first grade, the first day of first grade. I showed up and the teacher was taking roll, calling out the names. I was in my assigned seat, and she calls out Frank Chesworth, and I didn't answer. And she called Frank Chesworth again, and I said, well, my name is Biff. I'm not Frank. That's a true story.
You just looked around.
I was in the class of Miss Terry.
Wow.
She seemed like she was 800 years old. She was probably 30, But that's the true story.
I feel like we need to have you on podcast more. I'll learn more about
Yeah.
I learned something more.
Well,
something about
the
your
other
first
thing I
3
learned was
seconds.
one of the guys I golf with, when we were kind of going around at the end of the day golfing, they said Biff won the team competition today, and they go, who the hell is Biff? Sounds like a porn star to me. I said, well, that's me. I said, I'm a retired porn star. So,
Yeah. So when Back to the Future something happened.
Cooper's Mill.
Got it.
And they had brought in all these different
The
jellies.
tough
So
part for you is
we had a
that
toaster
video has been recorded
in the
the whole time,
studio,
so the-
and we were making toast and trying the jelly, and the toaster blew a fuse and basically knocked us off the air
wow.
Okay, got it.
for probably an hour. And our engineer at the time was so mad.
Sure.
Oh my gosh, that you guys would be so, out of touch that you would plug a toaster into the studio wall socket. I don't know. I didn't learn anything about
So your
this in
studio
broadcasting school.
actually ran on fuses?
I guess so. The old studios.
Wow.
So you blew
Oh
a
my
fuse
God.
in the radio station because you used a
Somebody
toaster.
plugged the toaster in. What
Was
kind
it
of-
you? Did you do it?
Oh yeah.
Was the toast? Was it worth it? Was the toast good?
Well, we had good jelly.
Okay.
It wasn't all about the toast. It was really about the jelly.
What is the best jelly?
It was probably some kind of apple butter.
Apple butter.
Yeah.
Biff, what's the best jelly? If
We're
you
back,
had to
by
go
the way. we're back on.
Well, it sure as heck ain't marmalade. I hate marmalade.
Not a marmalade guy?
I like strawberry jelly.
I'm a strawberry.
Understand.
Biff, I'm with you on that. I think that I reach for the strawberry jelly. If there's a raspberry hits pretty strong too, but I think I'm going strawberry as well. What do you think, Dave?
Well, they're all good. Grape is my most
Oh, get out of here, dude. Grape is like the, I guess. All right. If that's all you have, I guess.
Well, we would make great roommates because we would not ever argue about
That's
which
true.
jelly.
Grape jelly was hard to spread on the bread.
Really?
Grape doesn't spread as well as strawberry.
That's true. I will grant you that.
You got to
It's
have
tough
stuff
to
that
spread.
spreads.
I do appreciate Welch's having the squeezable jelly, though. It comes out of a bottle,
That's
just
true.
like ketchup. It's terrific.
Brian Regan has a bit about that. I was like, lunch and no cleanup. Doesn't even. You can put croutons in there and just squeeze it right in your mouth. It's perfect. Uncrustables. I love Uncrustables, but the grape Uncrustables are not worth what they are.
Wait, I have to ask. When did you learn that your name was Rusty?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that.
So
I've always
we're
been
off
called
the
that.
Back to the Future thing. Then.
I have a
We'll do
real
next
name,
episode.
and it's Russell, just because Dad thought you couldn't put Rusty on a birth certificate. But the whole life has been Rusty.
It was a sham.
Yes, my mom, when she was expecting, saw a John Wayne movie called The Expendables. He played the part of Corporal Rusty Ryan, and she loved John Wayne. I think Benji even knows she was a big John Wayne fan, and so I got named
Movie
after
posters all over the garage.
Corporal
The
Rusty
ding
Ryan in The Expendables. It was a movie, came out probably 1958, something like that.
So
I was gonna say.
I have seen it. I had to go back and watch it later in life.
So Russell was a socially appropriate vehicle to get you to the name of Rusty.
Yeah.
there was never a time that Grandma or Grandpa were calling you Russell. If they were mad at you, would they bust out Russell?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and probably the middle name follows.
Oh,
You know how that goes. Everybody has that.
Yeah, I definitely understand. So, so for me, like, because you named me Benjamin, it didn't hit quite as hard if you busted out Benjamin, because you're like, well, there was some intent, like yeah, if you're mad at me and you're like, Benjamin, get over here, there was already some intent for you to call me that. They never even intended to call you that. So if you were being called Russell, it could only mean one thing, and it was not good.
Big, yeah, deep doo-doo. Big trouble.
And so, Frank Biff, when Back to the Future came out in the 80s and you had already been going by Biff for your entire life, was that a major life change, or were you old enough at the time that it was like, people thought it was fun that my name was... Like, you weren't in school at the time.
Finally, there was a Biff
Finally, there was a
represented
bit,
in
but I hear more about that now than I did when the movie came out. When I grew up, Biff was more a character in Death of a Salesman.
Oh,
play,
yes.
See, so
Absolutely.
Biff, like in Death of a Salesman, before Back to the Future. So, and then there was a baseball player, Biff Pocaroba, who was a catcher for the Atlanta Braves, and so I got some of that. But no,
when
it wasn't a
you named
life-changing thing. I thought the movie was pretty cool, and I thought Biff was a pretty funny character.
Did you go... I mean, did you see the movie in theaters when it came
Yeah,
out?
sure did.
And were you... At the time, were you aware that there was going to be a character named Biff? Or were you like, oh my gosh, there's going to be a Biff in this show. Here we go.
I don't remember what I thought about that, to be honest with you. I really didn't.
Yeah, the name is too rare. It had to. Push
I guess
you
I
back
probably
in your
thought
seat.
it was pretty funny. It
Yeah.
would have been better if he got the girl.
That's true. You were probably rooting for the bully the entire movie.
Instead of being the doofus. But
David Letterman's stage director, stage manager for years was Biff Henderson.
that's true.
And
African-American
he would
guy,
bring
yeah.
him on to do some comedy bits.
Yeah, I remember him.
That's the only Biff I had ever heard
Biff
of.
Henderson, that's right.
Of course, Back to the Future. But
So is this the first Biff you've met in person?
oh yes,
Wow.
absolutely.
I think it's the only Biff I've
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Life-changing, life-changing.
You probably haven't met too many Rusties, right?
Actually, I don't think I've ever
No.
met another Rusty. Yeah. We both have rare father names.
Yes.
Yeah.
that's
I think this should be called the Biff and Rusty podcast.
they have usurped our podcast. We are done.
They do have better names.
They do have better names. Much catchier. We should just... You're going to go by Biff. I'm going to go by Rusty.
And my parents never called me Frank. I don't ever remember being
I was gonna.
called. No.
So they called even when you were in trouble. You were good.
As far as I can remember, I never was called Frank by anybody in my family.
Wow. What about at work?
Yeah, that was Frank at work and school.
That was it.
And then when I retired, Mom, Your mom.
They
did.
called you mom?
Says you're retired. Nobody's going to call you Frank anymore. You're back to being Biff when we meet new people. None of this Frank stuff anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
Frank is like dead naming him.
Yeah.
You identify as
I've been
Frank.
dead
Artist
named.
formerly known as Frank.
Yeah.
I remember that when I saw the movie National Treasure, that the main character's name from Nicolas Cage's character's name is Benjamin Gates, which is one letter different from my name.
Yes.
And I remember being in the theater, actually with Dad.
That was a head spinner.
And being like, is the main character of this movie going to have my same name? Because I thought that I thought that I was watching a movie and they just said my name.
We leaned into one another. You were probably 14 years old or something at the time. What did they just say?
It's going to be a long movie if I have the exact same name as the main character, first and last. If you don't know you're going into it.
That's right.
Yeah, so you had a Biff, you got to watch the movie, and unfortunately your namesake was the bad guy. When was the first time you met another David?
Probably like right away. Kindergarten, maybe.
Yeah, so you're probably the only person who didn't get any of like when you're introducing yourself to somebody, be like, oh, David, like blah blah blah. Like when I was growing up, I got like the dog every single time.
Here's what I do get, because my middle name is Thomas, so they'll say, oh, like the Wendy's guy.
Dave
and
Thomas.
my mom's name is Wendy.
Yeah.
Dave
Yeah.
Thomas.
Yeah. There's a
You
lot
are
of
Wendy's Dave Thomas.
There's a lot of square hamburger in this story.
Yeah, that's right.
So this is great. Benji is always being told, oh, like the dog. He just said that. Wouldn't you know, his grandparents get a dog and they name it Benji.
Yeah.
And so every time we're over their house, there's the dog running around, Benji, and then there's their grandson.
And so I had to decode who was getting yelled at. If it was like, get off the furniture, Benji, he was like, okay, is that me? Like, I'm on the furniture. Am I allowed to be on the furniture? Stop pooping in the yard, Benji. I'm pooping in the yard. Am I not?
They loved names like this. They had 3 pets in a row. There was Benji, Benny, and Penny. And they're like, okay, you know there are a lot of other names out there. Our pets are going to have that any sound.
It's like George Foreman naming all his kids George.
Yes.
How?
And he had like 12 kids, and they're all named George Foreman.
Did they all have like? I guess I don't know enough. Do either of you guys know enough about the backstory? That's like, did he would have had to have some other identifier, right? Like, do you think there was like George Frederick and George Harry
Probably
and George
number.
Michael?
Probably number 1, number 2.
Yeah.
Hey George, which number are you? 14. Get over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild.
Number 7. What'd you do with the remote?
We had
Man, that was number 6.
where I work, we have multiple interns, and their reference for their email is intern 1, intern 2, intern 3, and every week we do a pool volleyball game with the clients and the staff. And one of the interns was playing that week, and one of our guests said, "Hey, you, pass me the ball," and he says, "Hey, I have a name, and it's intern 1."
That's good.
So, well, since we have our special guests and they have limited time, should we draw 1 or 2 topics from a hat?
Yes, indeed. In fact, I'll pass it to you, Biff. You can draw.
Sure, I'll
from
draw
that,
one.
and you get to talk first. In case it's your first time listening in, we have topics that David and I have written in a hat. I'm not aware of the topics that David wrote.
Yeah.
David is not aware of the topics that I wrote.
Let me get my
And
glass here.
As soon as you draw them from the hat, you have to speak to that topic without any preparation.
Okay.
Then we'll all kick in and we'll all
Sounds
talk about
good.
that topic.
Okay.
And I'll have my reading glasses.
So I will read it for you, Dad. Father. So this says, the most embarrassing scenario you've been in.
Most embarrassing scenario. I'll go back to my childhood when I was in school. This would have been about, I'm trying to think, it was a spelling bee. I only say this because it popped in my head right away. And I was a pretty good speller as a kid. My mother was an English teacher, so I had to learn how to spell. Unlike the kids today. Well, that's a topic for another day. And so I'm up on the stage, and it's down to about 8 or 10 contestants. It was in middle school, junior high. And of course, it's just like you see on TV. There's people there in the audience calling out the words, and you got to spell them, and they give you the right or wrong. And the word I got, and it's a pretty easy word, wizardry. I thought I got this. I go W-I-Z-A-R-D, and I froze. And I said, E-R-Y. And they said, that's wrong. And I went, oh, shit. I think it's W-I-Z-A-R-D-R-Y. Whichever the correct spelling is, I was the opposite. So I blew an easy word in front of the entire school on stage, and I had to walk off the stage. Very embarrassing. I'm still recovering from that.
And you used salty language in third grade?
Well, I kind of went. I kind
It
of,
was a different time. That was a lot.
Okay.
it was kind of something under my breath,
Okay,
but yeah. So I was embarrassed because I figured I got this word. It's an easy word.
But in your defense, that was a pre-Harry Potter time when not everybody had read the word wizardry.
Well, that's true too. Well, it was long before Harry Potter.
How long specifically?
Well, that probably was around 1968 or 9, somewhere in there.
Gotcha.
Where if you were even associated with wizardry, you were getting sent to a special school, like a reform school,
Yeah.
because you were
Yeah.
probably invested in the dark arts.
Yeah,
It's
that's
a different
probably
time.
true.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's very well.
So that was embarrassing. Must have been because it jumped in my head when you read the topic
Yeah,
to
that
me.
was the first
I haven't
thing
thought about that for a
instantly.
while. Yeah.
How about you, Rusty?
This is difficult, but the one story, I was probably 10th grade, and a bunch of my friends who also had girlfriends. Now the story involves my current wife, so it's okay. We were all headed over to a house where mom and dad weren't going to be home, kind of thing. So we were having basically having this young love party. Everybody hanging out in a dark room on the couch with their significant other.
You've seen movies.
And things were going so well. And about 20 minutes in, my mother shows up and decides it's time for me to go home. And I think I was probably 60 years old, and she's still reminding me of that time that I was in that dark room with those kids. Oh, Mom, what are you doing? Yeah.
Did she like blow up your spot? Like, did she was she pretty direct about that? She knew what was going on
Yeah.
or anything like that?
Oh,
Or
yeah.
did she play dumb?
I think she was pretty assertive. Yeah, that I was leaving. Yes, we're not having any grandkids when you're in 10th grade.
And to
Oh,
her, in
more
her
like
defense, you
holding
did.
hands. We haven't even broke out the popcorn yet. Come on. Anyway, it's not nearly as good as the spelling bee story.
Yeah, but
That's a good one.
it's still. I mean, that's a good one. And she's still giving you a hard time.
Well, she's passed away.
Oh gosh.
Well, much like your story with Lucia, clearly it didn't ruin things because they went on
Right.
to
Yeah.
have a long marriage.
They had
with,
you.
with me. I exist after that story, so it obviously
Yeah.
didn't completely derail everything. If I'm thinking of embarrassing things, particularly from it seems like we're jumping into childhood embarrassing things. I definitely remember that in middle school I got pantsed one time, and I got like I was wearing like athletic pants, and they got the boxers too, and that was a little bit of talk of the town for a little bit. In the middle of like math class, and so that was that was kind of an embarrassing. Being like, all right, well, there you are. You're out there for the student body at that point.
Everyone
You were
knows.
much smaller then. They could take advantage of you.
Stature.
Then he had like this junior or senior.
Well played, Dad.
Coming from father.
Yes, I was shorter. How about you, David?
Well, I just want to point. I think it's funny how that pantsed became the term because you're not. It's really the opposite is happening. You're being de-pantsed.
Yeah, being unpants.
With that prank, yeah.
Yeah,
They're
that's
not
true.
giving you pants.
To be pantsed would be like, yeah, you're running around wearing swim trunks or something like that, and like, psych, put some pants on you.
Yeah.
Yeah, bad term.
I think I'm gonna go a different route, not the childhood route, but a recent embarrassing thing was when my dad listened to the first podcast and found out that I didn't kiss Lucia on the first date.
Did he razz you?
There was shame in his eyes.
Well, but you had a good reason. I
That's
mean,
true.
yeah, you had a good reason, and
Yeah, he had to find out who her favorite character was.
yeah, I mean that was
Yeah.
impressive.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So it's no longer embarrassing.
Was that a deliberate move? Were you like, she thinks I'm gonna try to kiss her. I'm gonna go
It
around.
actually was not. I actually wanted to know who her favorite character was.
In what?
Yeah.
In
Star Wars?
Frozen.
Oh,
Intro,
okay.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, David's was the snowman.
Oh,
Oh,
Yeah, that's right.
In that episode, you said the snowman. I didn't know
Yes.
if you, in real life you said the snowman or if you said Olaf, because it's much funnier if you said the snowman after watching the movie.
And hearing his name over and over. Oh my gosh.
All right, you want
All
to do
right,
more?
let's have Rusty pull the next one.
Next topic.
there we go.
Take back the hat.
All right, what's the topic? Oh, that's good.
Okay.
Go ahead, say it.
This is such an easy one.
But you gotta say
Go
it.
ahead. Did you read it? Favorite
Okay, so the topic that Dad pulled is favorite movie scores or soundtracks.
Well, just for starters, John Williams is one of the greatest Americans of all time. I mean, if I had to say top three, great Americans, he's going to be in that top three. And because I'm so into entertainment and I love his music, and all of his scores for movies rather, are terrific. But I'm going to go with the Jurassic Park theme. Yep, I could listen to it over and over again.
So there are obviously several themes that come through. When you think about the theme from Jurassic Park, are you thinking of da 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 da,
Oh, yeah.
or are you thinking bum 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 ba da 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 da?
The first, but the whole thing. I have the soundtrack on CD, and it all rolls together. But it's all just great stuff, and it stands on its own without dinosaurs.
Yeah, it's just great music.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I am also a professional hot air balloon pilot, festival announcer. So if there's a festival, I'll announce the balloons going up and what's happening and that kind of thing. And I have used that music
That's pretty
during
cool.
mass launches, so it works out really great.
So I've learned that song on the piano, and I remember I have a very vivid memory of it became a core memory because it was so funny to me. But I was in the lobby of my dorm room in sophomore year of college, and I was playing that on the piano, and this guy walks out and goes, "That was the most epic bathroom break I've ever taken." He's just having epiphany there.
Yeah, I don't think I've
Love
ever had ballad piano playing done while I was dropping a deuce or anything like that, especially John Williams music. That's fantastic.
Well, if you're on the topic of John Williams, we were talking earlier about Gilligan's Island. You know, one of the earliest composers on Gilligan's Island was a guy named Johnny Williams, and that's what John Williams was
I did not know that.
before. You
Wonderful.
could look at some of the old credits on the early seasons of Gilligan's Island. The first season, it says music, Johnny Williams. That was his name before he was John Williams.
And so he wrote some of the music.
Some
for
of
Gilligan's
the
Island.
themes that run through the Gilligan's Island show. Not the actual theme song, but a lot of the music that plays throughout the episode.
It's comical.
Those little like every
little
character had a
themes.
little theme song,
Well, motifs.
motif for that guy.
yes.
Johnny Williams.
You know, in addition to both of us having fathers with unique names, I think we both have fathers who have unique trivia knowledge. It might be interesting one day to do a trivia segment with them, if they ever back in
Yeah,
time.
we're gonna talk about World War II.
Yeah.
Well, John Williams is pretty amazing, and David's brother has seen him a couple of times at the Hollywood Bowl because he does a show every year at Hollywood Bowl and it just sells out and he loves it.
My
It's
other
awesome.
two, I mentioned top three.
Americans? Oh, yeah. Let's
Yeah, Jim Henson and Walt Disney.
All right.
Yeah, there it is.
Well,
There
You
it is.
gotta love both of those. I mean, obviously, Walt Disney speaks for itself. It's fine. We didn't. Walt Disney, obviously, everyone knows it speaks for itself. But Jim Henson, man, if you don't like the Muppets, it just you have no soul. The Muppets are so like wholesome and fun, and the music. And again, if Biff, I don't know, maybe you don't like the Muppets, but
Muppets are awesome, yeah.
I love the
I
Muppets.
used to
I love
watch
the
Sesame
music from
Street all the
Muppets.
time because of the Muppets.
Now,
with the kids.
did Jim Henson write like the music for the Muppets too?
I think he and that guy Frank Oz composed. Didn't they compose some of the stuff together? I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But since we're going to talk about music,
Right.
theme was it movie music?
Soundtracks.
Movie
Thank you for.
scores or soundtracks?
I will tell this story. I don't know if this is the best soundtrack ever, but it's the only time I went out and actually bought a soundtrack after watching the movie, and that was from the movie Gladiator. The
I remember
music,
that.
the movie Gladiator, the music in that movie is amazing for the movie. When you listen to the soundtrack on its own, some of it's good, some of it's not so great. But I remember going to the movie with Wendy, your mom, and then going, that music was flipping amazing. I got to have it.
It drives the action.
It drives the action. Thank you.
I
So
don't
there
think
you
I've
go.
ever seen the movie Gladiator. Have you?
Gladiator?
I have one time,
Yes,
Yeah.
you got to see it.
but I
You
have
guys-
my memory of the Gladiator is more so around my dad loving the soundtrack, and so I was like, I got to see it.
Yeah.
That's very interesting thinking about that concept where the music is perfect for the movie when it's complemented by the action or when it's reinforcing the action, where maybe it doesn't necessarily stand on its own quite as much, that you wouldn't like want to jog while listening to it, or you wouldn't set hot air balloons off to it with it playing. But when you have that context, when you have some of the extra dimension that's created by the acting and by those circumstances, well, that movie or that music can take it absolutely to the next level. I think that I don't know if I would necessarily say that this is my favorite score, but an example of that would be like Up, where even though the da 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 da, yeah, it's a great tune, but when you put that tune with what's happening in the movie, it's tear-jerking. It's just absolutely beautiful and poignant, and so sometimes it's the chocolate and the peanut butter coming together and making something really awesome with that.
Jelly, actually.
I agree with everything you just said.
Was that a Reese's reference or peanut butter and jelly
I
reference?
prefer Reese's over peanut butter and
Okay.
jelly. I mean, if I had to choose between one or the other.
You
But
know,
Robert,
speaking
wasn't
of-
it- I
That
was
was a
thinking-
throwback to those who were listening in the first 3 minutes of the show.
Yeah. To our favorite jelly.
Speaking of Reese's, you know, in E.T., you know, the M&M company turned down E.T. So that's why they have Reese's Pieces in that movie when E.T.'s pulling out the little Reese's Pieces.
Another
M&M
trivia
said,
fact.
M&M said,
Oh, yeah.
not going to do it.
Yeah.
Went with the
Were-
Reese's Pieces.
Were Reese's Pieces as well known of a candy at the
No.
time as they
No.
did? Was that a huge come up
That
for
was a
Reese's
huge
Pieces?
thing for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that movie was huge, yeah.
Man, and just think of where M&M's could be today if they had signed on to be-
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't a huge mistake. Yeah. All right, David, what do you think?
Oh man! Well, the first thing that came in my mind too was John Williams. I mean, Star Wars is one of my favorite childhood movies, and for nostalgic reasons, one of my favorites today. And every time I hear the Star Wars theme, it never fails to entertain me. So that's the true answer. But to give a different answer, I really like Danny Elfman's work as well, from like the Spider-Man movies, superhero movies. Yeah, I think that the original Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire has a phenomenal soundtrack. I don't know if that ever stood out to you, but just like even at the beginning before it starts, when they're doing the intro credits and the web is going, and it's just like the music's getting you all amped up and excited.
Did you know that Danny Elfman is the singing voice of Jack Skellington in Nightmare Before Christmas?
I did not know that.
He's not the speaking voice, but whenever Jack Skellington sings, that's Danny Elfman.
The Oingo Boingo guy.
Oingo Boingo.
Which
yes,
is another
indeed.
good soundtrack, by the way. The
Yeah,
Nightmare Before Christmas.
absolutely.
I honestly could not hum or whistle anything from Spider-Man movies, but boy, do I know that 1965 theme song because I watched it every day. You know,
Like the Spider-Man.
Spider-Man. Yes, absolutely.
Well, it's definitely not nearly as catchy as that.
Though there is a moment in one of the, I think it's the first Spider-Man Tobey Maguire one, where the lady in the subway is like on a little violin singing the classic cartoon theme, which is pretty awesome. So David, obviously, there's not a which theme comes to mind when you think of that movie, like there is with Jurassic
Sure,
Park.
there is actually. It's very simple. It goes do 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 do. I mean,
Is that Spider-Man that you're doing?
yeah, that's.
I was gonna ask you,
Oh, sorry.
what your favorite theme what your favorite motif in Star Wars is?
Oh, I think the cliche, the intro credits.
Gotcha.
It's awesome. Yeah.
Could you do some doo-doos on that for us?
Yeah, could you, that was
So from two
a
barbershop
lot going in.
singers, how was that?
Good.
You know what? I wasn't
It was very
expecting all
doo-doo-y.
of the. I wasn't expecting the preamble. I just thought you were gonna
Yes.
hit us with the do 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 do.
I have to give you the whole thing.
John Williams wouldn't want it any other way.
That's right.
For me, I would say my favorite movie score, though it's very difficult to say something not John Williams. I will say is Pirates of the Caribbean.
That's a good one.
I love the score from Pirates of the Caribbean. I think that one I could listen to, devoid of context, and it feels like you're on an adventure whenever you listen to it. It just kind of gives you some momentum. I think I could run or work out to that music, and then when you actually add the context of, Jack Sparrow being on the mast of a ship sailing into Port Royal or whatever, it just is so much more epic even yet.
So let's come up with some like before you guys were born, like our generation, like the James Bond themes. Dun, 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 the Goldfinger and all those. If you watch those old James Bond movies, not as high tech, but the music's pretty awesome in it.
So
Pretty awesome.
I know from modern James Bond movies that they
just like anything else.
did all of the James Bond movies, even like when it was Sean Connery, did they have like a theme song that was for that specific movie, and then it also had the James Bond main theme?
It ran through all the movies.
Gotcha.
When Connery and then the other two or three guys that followed him, and I think even the most recent ones, you'd hear a little bit of the James Bond theme, whenever, especially early in the movie when the character was introduced in the movie.
Gotcha. So, but like I know that like with Skyfall, in addition to having that James Bond like main theme, they also have the song Skyfall by Adele. Did they do that like for GoldenEye or
Every
Goldfinger?
movie had its own theme song. Yeah, that was always a big thing. What's the new James Bond song? Who's going to sing the new James Bond? Carly Simon or whoever it's going to be. Yeah, they always had a big star doing them.
So would that have been considered like an honor, like on par with like being the Super Bowl halftime show?
It was a huge honor to get the role to be singing the theme
Paul
song.
McCartney's "Live and Let Die."
Live and
That's
Let Die.
Live and Let Die is great.
Goldfinger, I mean, it was a huge deal.
I have a trivia fact about Live and Let Die.
Okay.
Weird Al Yankovic got rejected to do a parody of that song, and it was going to be Chicken Pot Pie. But they did not give him permission to do
McCartney
it.
said no. Yeah. Good for Macca.
Now,
Chicken Pot Pie!
Do you have to get permission, or was it out of respect to Paul McCartney that he said, okay, Paul McCartney said, no, I'm not going to do it?
I don't know the answer to that, but my understanding about Weird Al is he would want their consent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I know that he had beef, like Coolio and when he did Amish Paradise,
Yeah.
Coolio was not on board with it, but he did it anyway. I didn't know, maybe because it's Paul McCartney. It's like, okay,
maybe.
Paul McCartney doesn't want me doing it. Oh my god. I will say my favorite movie soundtrack that isn't like that's just a compilation of pop songs to go along with a movie. I love the Shrek soundtrack. The original Shrek with the two Smash Mouths, but I'm a Believer and All Star. It's got Hallelujah. It's got Bad Reputation. There's a Proclaimers song in there called I'm on My Way.
I'm on my way.
That I actually when I was exactly right. When I was a kid, I bought that CD and listened to it all the time because it just has some bops. There was like a Baha Men song that wasn't Who Let the Dogs Out. It was like some Baha Men deep track was in there. And do any of you guys have like a film soundtrack that isn't an original score that you particularly like?
Forrest Gump. The Forrest
Gump, yeah.
It's a great compilation.
Salute John B. and
It's a
Fortunate Son. And
picks up the late 60s and probably through his Forrest Gump's character's life. The music is amazing. How it's weaved into the story, and it's all, there's no original music. It's all, other than the theme, at the end of the credits, but it's just all songs from the 60s and early 70s.
Which, by the way, that main theme, the feather flight
Yeah.
theme from Forrest Gump is absolutely breathtakingly beautiful as well. But yeah, that soundtrack is awesome.
Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
all of their movie soundtracks are wonderful.
Yeah.
The granddaughters love it. They know all the ELO tunes now because of Guardians of the Galaxy.
Which it's amazing how well whoever put together that soundtrack. It's amazing how they just hit on every song. They're pulling all these oldies that seem to be kind of eclectic, and it's like there's so many songs to choose from that every single song that they pick, it's like, you know what? This song rules. Rubber Band Man rules. Hooked on a Feeling rules. Mr. Blue Sky is awesome. Like there's no duds in the entire thing. Ooh, John. I completely agree with you on that one. How about you, David?
Well, I guess not every song is original, but a lot of them are not original. But most of them are not original. But School of Rock has a really great soundtrack. obviously the ending song is original, which is also an amazing song. But yeah, all throughout, that was a soundtrack I had. I had Shrek. I don't know if this one's all originals or not, but Curious George with Jack Johnson.
Oh, yeah, most of those are originals.
Most of those are original,
Yeah,
but
he wrote
that was
most
a
of
really
those
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I got hooked on Jack Johnson. I don't know if you ever heard that soundtrack before.
I have
It's
not.
really good.
It's really good. And then this one's also not directly answering your question, but Tarzan was another soundtrack that I loved, like the Phil Collins
Oh
music.
yeah, that's true. And though that is all original for the movie, that's not, you wouldn't call it a score. That's
Right.
Absolutely great
Right.
point. Best Disney soundtracks.
Yeah.
Tarzan's got to be up there. I love a good Hercules.
Yeah.
Mulan.
Yeah.
Do either of you dads have a favorite like Disney soundtrack of slate of songs from a Disney movie?
Probably Jungle Book.
Jungle Book.
Ooh.
Yeah, I could probably sing every song on that top to bottom.
Oh, I hate to admit it, but Little Mermaid, only because we
Ah.
watched it a million times and our daughter loved it, and
She was
the songs are catchy. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? They're really well written songs.
Which I think that Hercules and Little Mermaid were both Menken and Ashman
They
did
were.
the music for
Yeah.
those. I don't know who did Jungle Book, and obviously Phil Collins?
Yeah, for Tarzan.
That did Tarzan.
Sherwood Brothers, I believe.
The Sherwood Brothers.
Oh, they were like Mary Poppins days.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Would they write a good score?
I don't know.
What?
Sure would.
Oh.
Yeah, I was hoping somebody else would say it.
I think we should
Running out of
mention-
material, eh?
So speaking of soundtracks, this is going to take a different turn, but I feel like the soundtrack of our household very heavily consisted of the Beatles, because my dad is a huge Beatles fan. I'm curious if there are any, like, look back to your childhood,
Yeah.
like, groups that your parents or your dad listened to.
Sure. I mean, I think that we listened to a ton of John Denver when I was growing up. We listened to a fair amount of like Simon and Garfunkel. So that folky singer-songwriter-y style. Now, my dad was in, much like your dad performed, did entertaining for in the public. My dad was in a duo that did a lot of like Everly Brothers and Simon and Garfunkel. So when I think back to the music that would be played around my house, I would think about the songs that would be part of that. So I listened to a lot of, as I said, Simon and Garfunkel, a lot of Everly Brothers, a lot of those like probably what would be like early 70s guys with a guitar kind of music.
Yeah, Dion.
Little Run Around Sue.
Abraham Martin and John.
Yeah.
Great song.
Yeah.
Stuff. I was hoping we mentioned, I think it's Pascal and Park. Pascal and somebody, the guys from Greatest Showman, La La Land. These guys are brilliant. They wrote the music to Christmas Story, the musical. So many good songs.
You know those three great things.
At least
Greatest Showman, La La Land, Christmas Story the musical.
aren't they big enough?
They're all in the same breath.
Although I do love the Greatest Showman's music.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But I like the Beatles too. I'm sorry to bring it back.
Said 'em.
I'm sorry.
I was thinking about that. I
They
was like,
changed the world.
I absolutely love the Beatles, and I have no doubt that you and Mom also love the Beatles, but I don't have like crazy strong recollection of that being played a lot. Oh, Carpenters. A lot of Carpenters in our household. That would be another thing I would have grown up on.
Beatles had so many. I mean, just literally hundreds of songs and music that we played. I don't think we ever got into just, okay, let's just overdose or binge on Beatles. Because you knew it was coming up on the radio sooner or later anyway. Yesterday, Here Comes the Sun. Just so many Blackbird.
Did you know that there's some negativity towards the Beatles that, like...
What? Say what? What you talking about, Willis?
I hear about it being in schools that there's an implication that the Beatles are just, hit machines, that it's not, like, with passion or thought, that they're just churning out songs to be... I disagree with that take.
Yeah.
And frankly, I disagree with, like, people say, not to draw a comparison between them and like Nickelback or them and Smash Mouth, but it's like, okay, well, their songs are successful because they're good, and if you don't like that, or
The way
if you
you
resent
have
the
to-
fact that they're successful,
Let me step in.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to defend my boys. The way you have to evaluate them is listen to what else was out on the radio when their stuff was out at the same time. Just listen to get out the hit list from 1965, play the Beatles hits, and then listen to the other stuff that was being played. It's like worlds behind of what the Beatles were doing. I mean, it just seemed like it was, they changed how you record, and they wrote their own songs, they performed their own songs. And they were always looking to advance what they were doing in the studio. This Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. I mean, they were very experimental. So this stuff about they were just churning out hits as they were doing it because they were taking risks, taking chances. She Loves You was a lot different than A Day in the Life, and that was just 2 years apart, 2 or 3 years apart. Mm-hmm. Listen to the Revolver album, which came out in 1966, versus She Loves You, which came out 2 years before that. The way they advanced in such a short period of time, amazing. Talk to people who are in the business now. Talk to Bon Jovi and Bruce Springsteen, all these artists. Why did they get into music? Because of the Beatles.
And you
So you got to listen to their peers and the people that followed them.
It's great.
So I'm taking over this podcast.
No, I
Pushed a button there.
But,
No,
I'm just. I mean, it's just it's indefensible to say they were just hit machines. But
like
they were hit machines.
They were hit machines because they were, as you said, they were innovating and that they were doing stuff that not everybody else was doing.
I think what my dad's illustrating is that they didn't just find like a formula and just reboot it. They were innovating and changing the way things were done, and they were kind of unique and talented in that way.
And if you listen to each album by the Beatles, you would find that each one of them had a completely different identity and a different risks that they were taking.
Didn't you say like all of their biggest hits were before they were 28 or something like that?
I mean, they broke up in 1970. I think Lennon had just turned 30. The others were all still in their. Ringo might have been. He was 30. So they were like in their late 20s. They'd written all this stuff before they were 26, 27 years old.
That's wild.
So don't you feel like you haven't accomplished anything now in your
life?
life?
Failure. Think about that. Internalize that for a second. Which Ringo looks better now than he did when he was when the Beatles were still together. He was kind of a goofy looking dude. Now he's like a handsome grandpa looking guy.
Yeah.
And
Get off the drugs and alcohol. It's amazing what you can do.
Wow.
But you talked about John Denver and some of the others, the singer-songwriters, Paul Simon. I listen to them and I watch them, but they were great singers and songwriters, but John Denver was an amazing guitar player. An amazing guitar player. People don't give him credit for that. Paul Simon was an amazing guitar player. You know, I kind of look at that more so than, gee, they could sing and write songs. I always listen to like to look and see how skilled they were with their instruments.
The strings.
Yeah.
Strings.
Did you feel like Herman's Hermits were just like a knockoff Beatles? Like, did you have any love for Herman's Hermits? Because they kind of seemed like diet Beatles.
I loved them. I'll jump in before you have a chance to say anything negative. I mean, just if the music's fun and you're, you can't get the tune out of your head, they're doing something right.
Yeah, we saw Peter Noone in concert. Your mother several times, and he still can perform. He's close to 80.
Yeah.
Great hits. If it was so easy, everybody would do it, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So did they follow in the British invasion? Yeah, they probably got a leg up because the Beatles and these other bands were ahead of them, but they were still pretty good and entertaining, and they had good songwriters.
Yeah, and Peter Noone was a very likable man.
Have you talked? You probably have talked to him.
Yeah,
because he still tours.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Yeah, I guess to make a weird analogy, that in the fitness world, like taking steroids by themselves don't make you necessarily fit or strong. You still have to put in the work. So like you can ride a wave, like maybe the Herman Hermits did, but if you're not good, you're gonna fall off that wave pretty quick.
You heard it here first. Herman's Hermits was on steroids.
That's the rumor being spread.
Pass that around your schools.
Yeah.
Really catch on. So do you have anything else to add on this?
Well, any final thoughts from dads today? From Rusty or Biff?
Well, I worked in talk radio for 37 years, and this has really gone by fast.
Yeah.
See?
I didn't have to watch the clock, didn't have to worry about punching up the next commercial. We just had a great time.
Can you understand how we would have a 3.5 hour podcast based on this formula that we have here?
Well, I would suggest you have 3 1-hour shows and half of
All right, so this has been fun. The hay is in the barn, Dad. We already published that podcast. Okay, duly noted.
Coming from the expert.
I guess my final thought is it's nice to have my trip down memory lane kind of sync up with modern technology. It's been kind of fun doing this,
Cool.
especially with our boys here.
Well, maybe this is the first of many more to come.
Maybe.
Hopefully.
Next time you're in town, Rusty.
Yeah.
we'll
There
get
we
the
go.
I hope it's soon.
Yeah.
No, it's been fun.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us do it.
Well, the first thing that came out of your mouth was something I never knew about you. That you thought you were Biff until you were 6 years old,
Yeah.
and then
That still blows
you didn't
my
know your
mind.
name was Frank. Yeah. Wow.
All right. Well, as we always say, if you're listening to this, find something better to do, please, because this is nonsense. But also thank you for listening, and dads, thank you guys for being here. It was a real delight. Yeah, I appreciate your time.
Yeah, this is super cool. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bye guys.
See ya.